Think your worship service can't be improved? Stick around and see how you do against these 5 points today on the Church Revitalization Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast, brought to you by the Malphurs Group team, where each week we tackle important, actionable topics to help churches thrive. And now, here's your hosts, Scott Ball and AJ Matthew.
Welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast. My name is Scott Ball. I'm joined by my friend and co-host, AJ Matthew. AJ, worship services.
Oh boy, it's a tough, sensitive topic.
We've been to a lot of them. Seen the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah. We don't shy away from sensitive topics.
No, and there are some consistent mistakes that we see when there are mistakes. And I think maybe before we hop into what these top five mistakes are, maybe it's worth just taking a couple of minutes and reflecting on why does it even matter?
Yeah.
And, I guess I also want to say, we're not really even talking about style here or different traditions or music types and things. To me, those are not actually usually the make or break difference between a good and a bad worship service, in my opinion. I've been to any range of different styles or traditions or whatever, and been to good and bad in all of these kinds of things. So I guess I want to head that off at the pass. If anyone's going to go, oh, they're going to say that it's got to be in a warehouse with lights and fog machines for it to be any good. Yeah. And we're not talking about any of that today, one way or the other.
Style doesn't necessarily doing something with excellence. That's more, if you really wanted to kind of boil it down, doing whatever you do with excellence and with intentionality. And we don't need to give away every point here on the front end, but I think that's more encompassing what we're going for today is doing whatever you do with intentionality in several areas and doing it really well.
Yeah, for sure. So why is this even important? Why do we need to be sure that we get this right? Why is the worship service so important?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, maybe we even just gloss over what you just referred to it as, a worship service. Even the term worship service has just become what we do on Sunday without maybe even considering this is intended to gather people together for several reasons. Primarily, though, I would say to worship the Lord, right? To give honor, to extend our appreciation, our worth back to God, the giver of all things. And so I think that's easily missed, by the congregation, those who gather and those who prepare and present. So recentering ourselves there. And I'm not saying that's even easy, and probably if a lot of our listeners just stop for a second, they're like, hold on, am I actually going into this every Sunday with, a heart and an expectation to give worship back to our God? I would think most of us, being honest, would say, no, we don't hit that. We don't hit that every single time. And that's okay. That's part of our human brokenness and all of the baggage that we bring in every Sunday or Wednesday or Saturday or Friday or whenever it happens for you.
Yeah. I just finished reading this morning, the book of Acts, and I'm just reflecting that everywhere Paul went, he started with going into that weekly gathering and preaching the word. Like, there were other things that happened, other places that he went to communicate about God's word in the streets and in the different public forums and so on. But always he'd start there. He'd start with the gathering of the brothers to preach the word and try to bring the message there. And so this rhythm of gathering and preaching is a part of the Christian experience from day one. And so it is the central moment for Christian experience. I believe the communal gathering, hearing the word preached, and so I believe that it's a necessary habit for us to get into and for it to be done well. It's also, depending on where you're at in the world, it still may be the first entry point for an unbeliever to hear the gospel. That's increasingly less the case. There's, as the world changes, people are less likely to just pop in on a Sunday morning. But it's still a primary vehicle for evangelism in most churches, in a lot of churches. And so for that reason as well, it's important that you have it together. So I think there's an abundance of reasons why it's good to make sure that you be doing these things with excellence and to avoid these top 5 worship service mistakes. And with that being said, maybe we can hop into those.
Yeah, absolutely. What chapter was it in the book of Acts that talked about the announcements and then the 3 songs and the prayer?
The liturgy, the modern liturgy. Yes, You
didn't read that part?
No.
Okay, number 1. I don't think that was in Exodus either.
No, it was in First Hesitations.
That's right. That's apocryphal. We won't get into that. All right, number 1, your announcements. And so Paul, I don't know, Paul probably made some announcements like, hey, we've got there's some Romans not too far away, so watch it.
That's right.
Are the announcements clear? Are there too many? These are the things to be looking at. We don't need to spend the first 15 minutes just talking about every single thing that has happened, will happen, might happen, is going to happen. We really want to focus our announcements on just really the highest level, most important pieces that everybody needs to know, probably the most timely or that require the most preparation, but we definitely want to focus on what is important for guests or newer folks to hear that would lead them to get connected to the church in whatever system or process you have for that. Or maybe even an event. I mean, maybe there's something just coming up in the next week or 2 that would be awesome for somebody that's new to the church to get connected with. But you should also have something that always happens that you want them to take as their next best step for connecting with your church.
Yeah, totally. So this is this assumes that you have a discipleship pathway laid out, which we've talked about many times throughout the podcast. You could just search for an episode on that and you'll find it. We've got more than one, but we always talk about you should use the current step to promote the next step. That's so lots of times churches think that Sunday morning is the only time we have to share information about anything. And so therefore we need to share information about everything. And when you share information about everything, it's almost like you're sharing information about nothing because everything is at the same volume level. So you really want to focus in the worship step about whatever the next step is. And if you're going to add anything on top of that, it should just be things that would supplement that. So maybe you do have some sort of mixer type, social type event that would be good for a new person to be able to form some relationships and get connected to the church in some way beyond Sunday morning. Great. But maybe you have some newcomer event that you offer on a regular basis, or a new member class or growth track that you offer on a regular basis. Or maybe the next step is to join a team or to join a group. You want to be talking about those things. And I used to get complaints because we had a certain set of announcements that we would do every week. And I'd have people who were there for a long time and they'd say, Scott, I kind of get sick of hearing the same announcement every week. And I'd say, it's not for you. We're not saying it for you. Every week is someone's first week. And so it's the first time they're hearing it and it's for them. If you want to know about the thing that's relevant to you, check your email, because we're talking to you in a different format. Sunday morning, that's for guests when we get to announcements. So if you were to take that angle, does that mean you would never announce anything that doesn't have to do with guests? Of course not, but they should take the number 1 spot and the majority of the focus.
Yeah, Yeah, the guests and maybe people that have been there for a while, but they're still haven't taken that step.
Right.
They're only just
Right.
like Sunday morning sitters. So
I consider them guests. If they haven't taken any step out,
yeah.
they may be 10th time guests, but if they've not taken a step outside the worship service, they're still guests.
That's a good point, and maybe some of our leaders that are listening maybe have lost sight of that, because they've been there a long time doesn't mean they're still not in guest mode. So anybody that's in guest mode, regardless of the length of service or attendance, should be kind of all handled the same way. And our last point, and we see this more so in smaller churches, not 100%, but insider language. Don't leave it undone. Like talk to Janet or see Steve after the service. Come on, who
is Steve?
Yeah, if there's 20 people in the church, even if there's 20 people in the church and there's somebody new, they still don't know who Steve is, even though the other 19 do. So
I went to a church one time, and I remember they had up on the screen, "Congratulations, Caleb," or I don't remember the name. And it was like a picture of some kid. Clear. I was like, is this the pastor's kid? Is this someone in the church's kid? They had won like some sports thing the previous week. I mean, I guess it was neat for that kid to get celebrated, but if this was a church of like 100 or so people, and I thought, who is this for? Because I have no idea who this is. And I felt fine for Caleb. It was just very weird. It felt very much like I'd walked into a family thing, I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I guess on one hand, churches would look at that and go, look, we celebrate our people. And if you become a part of this family, we're going to celebrate you and your kid too. But I wonder if that's true. Like, would they celebrate every kid the same way they did this kid? Yeah, I don't know. It was just strange. It was weird.
Yeah. Our church did something. Actually, I noticed our announcements this Sunday, they talked about something in a slightly different way about how to get more information. And out in our lobby area, there's, I don't know, I guess maybe we've got 2 or 3 different places where there's screen on the wall and there's people there to help you get information or get connected. And so during the announcements, the lady giving the announcements pointed up at the screens that everybody could see. And she said, if you would like, more information about signing up for this or whatever it was, you'll see a screen just like this one out in the lobby after church, like the big green screen with words on it that you'll know clearly. So you don't have to find a person, go out there, look for the TV screen with the big green graphic on it, go talk to those folks. So, I thought that was kind of a more creative way of talking about how to find out more information or get connected. Just look for the picture.
Yeah. Or if you don't have money for screens or whatever, just get some lanyards and be like, hey, anybody, this was what we had it's like anybody with this yellow lanyard can help you.
Yeah.
And find them.
Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah. Different colored shirts. Yeah. Any number of ways. So yeah, be creative. All right. So that's it on announcements. Our second point is having a clear call to action. So, and we're already kind of talked about this, having announcements centered towards things that are going to be meaningful to guests and getting people deeper connected. But make sure that there's a call to action, a specific call to action that you want guests or others to take. And to get even a little bit more granular on how to make this effective, don't just do it on that like first 30 seconds when somebody walks up, to the front and they say, hey, we're glad you're here. If you're a guest, blah, 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 do this and that. You know what, that you may not have any guests in the room yet. Gosh, half of your weekly attenders are probably not in the room yet. If they're like most of the churches that we see or are a part of. When I sat down in my seat this last Sunday, I looked over and I'm like, gosh, I thought we were doing a little better than this on attendance. And then by the time, the lights changed and, we were done with the first song, I looked around again and I'm like, oh, here they are. Now we're full. So beginning, middle, and end. And you can make this work. Scott, you can kind of walk us through, what that layout or format might be to cover guests in more than one point during your worship service.
Yeah. So first of all, have a call to action. I mean, I know you already said this, but have a connect card to fill out. And it should be really easy. Like it should not have, I know you think, man, if we have all these spaces, people will fill them out. No, just have your name, email address, and phone number, and then like maybe I want to go to growth track. I want to become a Christian. I want prayer, something like maybe that maximum, even if that, that's the maximum number of things you should have on a Connect card. Keep it simple. So you can have a digital one, you can have an in-person one. The in-person one, be sure if you're going to ask people to do it, that you actually have pens or pencils available for people to fill them out. Don't assume people are going to have those with them. If you're going to do a digital one, just every week, just make sure the link is working, because you might think, well, I don't need to check that. Of course it's working. Not of course it's working. It's it's technology. Things sometimes break and you don't know why. So just double check and make sure everything's ready to go before Sunday. And then, yes, beginning, middle, and end. So AJ mentioned already, at the beginning of the service, hey, welcome to such and such church. We're glad you're here. Connect card, language, and so on. And then bring it up again, like when you get to your offering. And I would encourage you to have a special offering time, even if your offering is in a box in the back. Mm-hmm. Still take time to pray for the offering and say, hey, as you leave today, our offering is in the back. We want to we want to pray for that, your generosity and so on. If you're a guest with us today, we don't expect anything from you except we'd love to get that Connect card from you. So you can place that in the box in the back or in the basket as it's passed, or whatever it is that you do at your church. And so that's the second time you can bring it up, and that should be closer to the middle of the service, maybe just before or after the sermon. And then at the end, right before, when you're closing out the service, thank you again so much for being with us today. We love and appreciate you. If you're a guest with us, don't forget to please fill out that Connect card so that we can follow up with you and make you feel welcome and at home, or whatever it is that your language is. Side note on this, AJ, I really encourage churches to come up with a little bit of a script almost in what they say. You can make it your own, but whoever is hosting should use certain keywords or language every time, so that you're sure that you say it the way it needs to be said. And anybody who's going to host, whether it's someone on staff or a volunteer or whatever, they're using some of that same language every time. And test drive different things. What gets a better response when we say it this way? People tend to fill it out, and so on. There's a little bit of some psychology to it, I guess, a little bit, but just play with it and see what fits with the culture of your church and what works for you. But be clear on that. You can't say, wow, guests never fill out our Connect card, but you only mention it once. That's at the very beginning, and you don't have pens available, or you don't even have a Connect card. There's a lot of reasons why that doesn't happen a lot of the time. There's almost always a flaw in the system.
Yeah, for sure. The more I think about this, I think that middle one that's your sweet spot. At the beginning, like I said, people are still coming in. I remember when our first child was born, we've always been like front of church sitters, but we sat in the very back because we had a baby, like crying, diaper changes, need to get out. We sat in the back. We were shocked to see how many people left, like when the last song after the sermon, play one more song, and the exodus of people heading for the parking lot. They didn't hear those final announcements. So I think middle is the sweet spot. That's when people will actually be there.
Yep, for sure.
All right. Number 3, talking about being intentional about your worship service. We're talking front of house people transitions, moving from one element of your worship service to the next. Keeping really, I guess the overall theme here, Scott, is keep distractions to a minimum, right? I mean, keep the focus where you need it and keep distractions to a minimum.
Totally. Yeah. And so you really want to manage these transitions well. And I would encourage you not to use prayer as a transition. It's like lots of times churches, that's their default. It's like, we need to go from this song to this song, or from a song to the pastor coming up to preach. What should we do? Let's just pray. The prayer should be more than a transition. It should be something that's meaningful and it plays its own role within the service. So you be more creative than that. Think through things. Video bumpers are a great way to do transitions. Depending on the style of music that you play, some soft pads between songs or between elements can be good transitions. But think through those things and know how those transitions are going to occur. And the goal is not to come off as professional and polished, although I guess that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. The goal is instead to be minimizing distractions. You want the focus to be on Jesus. And so there's actually, this might sound counterintuitive, AJ, but on the one hand, if everything is super professional and polished, I guess there's a chance that it might come off like a concert, and that would be its own distraction. But if you're not prepared enough, then you're actually distracting people from worship. And so if perhaps there's some happy medium that is polished enough and practiced enough that it doesn't come across like a show or a concert.
Yeah.
But keeps the distractions away.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Actually, I'm going to call an audible. Let's move our preparation point up here next, since we're kind of moving
Sure.
that direction anyway. So transitions being moving between elements in the worship service, but also the way you prepare for the worship service overall is going to be our fourth point today. This lack of preparation will end up showing, and it might show up differently to somebody that's been in church for decades. Might show up different to them than it would have guessed. And I don't think you could count on a lack of preparation not being noticed by either of those groups, who would have very different perspectives, because guests even are going to come in with ideas, maybe completely unfounded. Maybe they went to church when they were a kid and they had ideas of what it might be like, or maybe they've never been to church but still had ideas of what it might be like. But your preparation in making things work well, making things connect well throughout the worship service is going to make an impression on everybody in the room in different ways, depending on what they're coming in with and their own preconceived ideas. But some of the elements that fall into this are the preparation between the message that's being preached and the music that's being presented, to elicit worship, and to maintain a theme, throughout, which we'll kind of get into a little bit more in our next point. But Scott, preparation shows no matter who is on the receiving end.
Preparation shows, lack of preparation shows. I mean, you can really tell. I've worked with a number of churches over the years, not pointing fingers at anyone in particular, because there's been a lot of them where they don't practice. The band doesn't practice until Sunday morning. And you can usually tell because it's pretty thrown together. They're stressed out. You can see it in their faces. I guess if you absolutely have to do it Sunday morning, you should do it way early Sunday. Get there super early, so there's more than enough time. I have one church that I'm working with that has done this. They still are doing Sunday morning, but they moved it back, so now they're not as stressed, and that's helped. So I would still prefer them to be doing it a different night of the week, if I'm being honest. But being rehearsed makes a big difference, because you can't really be, this is just me, and this is I was a worship leader for a long time. If I'm not well rehearsed, I'm thinking about the music. I'm not thinking about Jesus. I'm not thinking about leading people to Jesus. I'm thinking about, don't screw up this chord, or how many times exactly do we say we're going to do this bridge, or I need to be sure that I cue this person well. And so when you've rehearsed, all of those things are second nature, and then you can really be focusing on the people and leading the people. So be sure you're well rehearsed. Same goes for the pastor or whoever's preaching. Like, you should practice that sermon more than once. You should know what your time is. Like, I'm not saying you have to manuscript it out or whatever. And I kind of don't even care. I was about to say, maybe the older you get and the longer you've done it, you don't need as much practice. I don't think that's true. I think that you still need practice. Like, no matter how long you've been doing it, you should be practicing it. And also, I think you need to put in the time in the writing. I've talked about this on the podcast before, AJ. I think there is a law of diminishing returns. Like, you can work on it to a certain point, and then however long you work on it on top of that, it's not going to get that much better. It's going to only on the margins, and you would be sacrificing other things that are important at that point. But there is a minimum, and I think that minimum is going to be at least 15 hours, probably somewhere between 10 and 15 hours on a sermon. If you put in less than that, it's probably not good enough. It should be better than what I could just figure out by reading the passage on my own. Like if I were to read it on my own, and I can get the main point, you should be giving me more than that. If you're bringing me the word, I'm that's just my conviction on that, AJ. And if you don't put in that effort, I think it's dishonoring to the Lord to not put it in. There's
a lot of pieces to this that, again, depending on the person's perspective, maybe level of maturity in their faith, that could pick up on that. And maybe that might be their takeaway, that God really wasn't honored in what we saw today. I've sat through a sermon that was obviously being read the entire time, and didn't leave a very good impression on me. I don't know, maybe some people would push back on that, but if somebody,
some people manuscript their sermons, and that's fine, but even if you manuscript, you don't have to sit there and read.
At least put the effort into learning how to present without looking at the paper the entire time. So that was a particular pet peeve of mine that Sunday morning. All right, preparation is important. And I love that you say, it'll show in honor to God. Our last point today is managing the environment, the overall environment and feel. The look, the sound, the smell, the message of what you want people to take away and the experience that they have. A relationship with Jesus is an experiential thing. And worshiping God is an experiential thing, and learning about his word is an experiential thing. And I think sometimes this is overlooked in how the entire environment works together to allow people to enter into that space, not only physically, but emotionally, and to, bring yourself into a point where ultimately, really, what are we trying to do, Scott? Are we not trying to cut out the world around us so that we can center in on God and what he's done for us and who he is in his character and his behavior towards us and all these things? We have to be able to cut out the distractions. And so managing the environment, thinking about that, will I think greatly improve the experience that everybody has. And I think that goes directly into how much can we improve in our relationship with Jesus? How can we improve in our knowledge of God and our understanding of him incrementally every single Sunday? I think that's what we should be going for. That everybody get just a little bit deeper, a little bit greater, because as a result of what happened this Sunday. If we go into it with a neutrality mindset, I think we're going to get neutrality, or we're going to get deficit. We're not going to get that incremental increase.
I feel like I've evolved on this a little bit in my thinking over the years, from when I was younger to where I am now. And again, there's no accounting for taste. I think that there's differences of opinion on this, and there's no need to be legalistic about any of this. But it's certainly worth considering as it relates to environment, that God cared a lot about environment and how it, not for his sake, but for ours. So there's just loads of instructions on what the tabernacle is supposed to look like, what it's supposed to smell like, what it's, all of these things. You got the smells and the bells, going on in the tabernacle and in the temple and in cathedrals and things like that for a reason. All of these things signify something, and they're to elicit a response in us towards God. Like that's what they're for. They're for us. They're not for him. He doesn't need it. He knows what heaven's like. The things that we build, the holy spaces that we build on earth, are intended to direct us upward towards him and to think on heavenly things. And so I think that you can accomplish this through a variety of ways. That's why I'm saying there's no accounting for taste, but we should be thoughtful about this. I think that there's a Puritanist, like a Puritan-like aesthetic that we have, especially in the States, on like white walls, maybe just a cross on the wall, and that's it. That has too heavily influenced us away from thinking about how we could make things beautiful in a way that would draw our eyes up towards heaven and draw our eyes up and our thoughts towards him. And maybe that's not a good thing. And so I would just encourage you, and whatever your style is, or whatever your whatever your background is, maybe don't be in a rush to bash out those old stained glass windows. If you're, maybe you're updating your music, but you feel like, oh, I got to get rid of the stained glass. Maybe not. Like, take a hard look at it. What does that mean? Why did the people who put it in there, what were they trying to communicate? Anything that you can do. AJ, you and I spent some time in Europe this spring, doing some work with churches over there. I loved walking into these churches and just being inspired by the grandeur of it. So I don't know, just be thinking about the environment, AJ, I guess is what I'm trying to say. What are you communicating? And is it helping or hurting people to think about Jesus? And what could you do, even in some modern, contemporary-like ways, to use the space to point people towards Jesus?
Yeah, absolutely. We are not suggesting one way or another is better. We're really just encouraging you to think about it. Be intentional about it. Modern versus Gothic architecture. I mean, whatever. Be you. But I think there's some super creative ways, that we can do this, and utilizing the elements that we have, and even technology that we have in lighting and video and sound, in song. So and in we can use words too. We can actually tell people what we're going for. We don't have to say, now in today's service, when we get to this part, think about this. But we can speak clearly. I think we can even just say, today we're thinking about this, and this, maybe this symbol that we've put up, or the way we're lighting this, we want to draw our eyes there for this reason. You can you don't have to leave it mysterious.
Right. We do this, or a lot of churches do, in the Advent season, right? When we have an Advent wreath, or we have
right. Yeah.
Explain. We're lighting the candle of peace, or like we explain these things. You can use other types of symbols, and that's all the tabernacle was. It was just a whole bunch of symbols. It's like we've got a lampstand with seven lamps on it, like that has a symbol to it. We have there's all these different things. You've got the table of showbread, you've got with the 12 loaves, right? So like you got all these different various symbols that have meaning. And so you can do the same thing. You can have layers of meaning in what you're doing with your space, whether it be contemporary, modern, traditional, whatever, it doesn't matter. And all of these things can lead people to reflect upon the Lord and transport them in their minds to a heavenly place. And I think that's maybe not a bad thing, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Yep. So there you go. There's our 5 possible areas that maybe you've made some mistakes in worship services in the past, but maybe some areas we hope that you'll think creatively about. And again, our keyword this week is intentionality, to lead people to experience what you hope they will experience, draw them closer to the Lord. So thanks for being with us. This has been episode 143 of the Church Revitalization Podcast, which means, you guessed it, malfersgroup.com/143 is where you'll find today's show notes, links to the YouTube video version of this. If you're listening to the audio, you can listen to the podcast there online as well. If you're over on YouTube watching this on video, but we're glad you are wherever you are. Be sure and like, share, subscribe, and pass this around to others. We'd love to expand our reach in helping the church be as healthy as it can for the purpose of glorifying God and changing the world. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you next week.